Hi guys, this is Joe Whitcomb with another episode of Reboot Your Relationship, and today we're going to be talking about the owning my part is the way out of any conflict. And so I don't know about you guys, but I'm a bit of a contrarian. I like to be able to talk about sometimes the other side of love, and that's the things that make it hard for us to really be able to connect and to be able to fight in ways that are healthy, to stay connected through the conflict and to be able to work towards resolution, restoration, repair, and reconciliation through some of these mutual injuries that we get into. So we're having more of these functional adult relationships, right? So that's really important part of any type of relationship, because conflict is inevitable, and a lot of us who think that relationships should be easy breezy, not complex, drama free. Well, that's a good outcome and a good goal to have. And I think that's something we can all strive for. However, to be able to get there, sometimes we have to roll up our sleeves, do some of the hard work, and do some of the things in the beginning so we can get to the ease, breeze, and play and fun, and learn some of these skills. One of my biases is we do need to have a shared context. We need three things: shared context, kind of like a shared language, narratives, and then some tools. And we need these tools and resources to help us guide us through this. And we also need a sense of community and tribe, people that are there to have our back and to get through some of these things. So, but when we think about intimacy or being seen, kind of like the avatar, I see you. What makes that intimacy tricky sometimes is that in our attempts, your attempt to feel seen, heard, known, gotten, all these things that most of us really desire, and when you take a risk and you share who you are, your most vulnerable moment in that moment. But what happens instead of being received and understood, you start feeling misunderstood and judged and not really heard by your partner. So then we begin to get into this shared trigger, this mutual injury, this co-type of regulation or dysregulation. And we get triggered into our stuff, right? And now we all get on this kind of defensive and feeling blamed or made wrong for how you're feeling. And you may find that your partner is denying your experience, and because you're now both in this low, you're triggered in this part of you, and in that moment, it's hard to really believe and hard to even conceive that you have the power and freedom to choose something different than what's actually occurring in the moment. So when you get triggered and all that defensiveness, so there's kind of this denial of your experience, their experience, and then there's this attack, kind of this lashing out back at the person, and then there's this reverse blame, and then one of you goes to the victim and the other person feels like they're the offender, and you get this. Go back to the drama triangle, back to the first couple episodes that we did on the drama triangle, where you get these two one-up positions, this one-down position. Now we're all in the victim stage of playing the powerless helplessness and all that shutdown, right? So what just happened? Something happens. Something happens. And now you have a story. This big old story about your partner, and you're adding and subtracting meaning and interpreting, translating everything, and through this lens of something's going on, and you're looking for evidence, and now you're in this vicious cycle, this vortex. So we just got triggered, right? So now you're triggered. Your jaws are clenched, your hands are in fists, and you're throwing your hands up in the air, and all this stuff is going on, and you feel that hotness in your chest. You're running away. And what's going on now? Because it's our own past now that's preventing us from seeing each other. It's that, so your vulnerability and the way you shared it may have reminded your partner of mom or dad. And you get hooked there. Now we're hooked. How do we get unhooked in these moments? But here's where you get derailed by getting triggered, and you go into your stuff and you're projecting that your partner is a jerk or somehow not going to be able to connect with you in some ways. So you're there, and now you're really triggered because you're reacting just like my mom, just like my dad. And we want to point out how lame they are derailing this whole thing. You then are so fed up with the whole thing, you just walk away with your hands in the air, and you feel judged. And so one of you feels unmet, the other person's feeling judged, and now we're in this conflict, wondering if you're crazy and why you're with me and why you're with them. And you get triggered by, and then they get triggered by you leaving the conversation because of whatever abandonment stuff that comes up, then maybe that you're not aware of or they're not aware of. And then we get desperate and we try to get the other person to come back and work it out with you. But then you're doing it from this place of panic and charge and fear. And you don't really receive it or trust it because it's loaded with all this baggage, all these constraints, and on we go. Complain, defend, complain, defend. So does anyone out there relate to this one? This is something I see all the time in couples relationships, my relationship, all of our relationships, because in the heat of the conflict, it's easy to overlook, let's say, the beauty of your partners. Your beauty, their not being able to see their innocence and only the guilt. And we believe that other people can affect our mood. So in reality, it's not, the limit. It's not their limitation, it's our own limitation. Because in that moment, only you are able to constrain that. And you got to understand, in any conflict, there are multiple dimensions co-occurring simultaneously, and not one thing can really define what the conflict's really about. So we have to slow this way down. So if this is so, let me ask you this. Why does it seem as if negative people have the power to limit our happiness or of others? If I'm not okay, they're not okay. If they're not okay, I'm not okay. This whole thing, this whole vicious cycle. Because in truth, your happiness isn't really restricted by anyone's behavior. It becomes compromised when their negativity inspires you to turn away and close down your own heart. And so here we're going to be talking about how do we transition from avoiding, stonewalling, going to silent treatment, or lashing out to empathizing with those in pain. Even if it's, sometimes you gotta do that silently and at a distance, so you can begin to access more of your unlimited power as this love in action type of thing. So let me just give a caveat on the distancing, right? There's two types of relationship silence. One that is for the betterment of the relationship, to keep it safe, keep it protected, and that's the one that you take a time out and you say, I love you, I'm taking this time out for me, I'm not in a good place, and I'll come back to you in an hour or two and we'll talk it through. The second one, which is the silent treatment or the stonewalling, ghosting, and you don't hear back from that person, which is abuse. And a lot of us may not understand that as abuse, but it's, again, abandonment, neglect of this, abandonment of the process of communication, which is really violence toward it, because think of it as the good, bad, and ugly, right? The good, which things happen in a relationship, there's good. And then there's bad, and the bad stuff happens. But a lot of us take a bad 5 minutes and milk it for the entire day or week, punishing our partner, withholding love, using these passive-aggressive Darvo strategies that we talked about in previous episodes. And that strategy is a way of punishing and withholding love, and that becomes part of the dance, where you turtle up and you become love avoidant. And so that type of dynamic begins to fuel this insecurity in the relationship. Again, this is violence towards the relationship. And I know we don't like to think of it like that, but it is. It's something that, because there's really, when you're withholding the restoration and repair, or the movement, the flow towards the reconciliation, there's the punishment of the within the partnership now. And it becomes a gridlock, an impasse. And now you have the immovable object and the unstoppable force, and two people co-creating, co-regulating around this dynamic, and now we're stuck. You're stuck. So when this lack or limitation shows up in your life, this has got to be really, it has to act as a kind of like the perfect blessing, just the right gift for you as a powerful catalyst of your transformation. It's got to be that moment. Its purpose is to help you pinpoint all the traces of fear around our attachment styles that surface and how defensively you are responding to change. And so you get into these vicious cycles, because one of you now are choosing this harmony box over here, and then you have the truth box. You got love and logic, grace and truth, but the harmony box here, you're in that box, walled off, and the other person's trying to reconnect. And so we got to find an intersection where we bring harmony and truth, love and logic, and and grace and truth together, where it intersects, and that we're able to do both. So if you're really good at the, let's say, the connecting, the love, that part of you that's really a connector, pursuer, in some of us have to learn to add more logic in the harmony and the grace. And some of you who are more in the harmony and, I'm a peacekeeper over here, got to add the love, right? So that's, you have these two curriculums, yours and theirs and ours, because you get these two binary fixed positions, where these binary fixed positions just keep you in a gridlock. So we have to commit to a shared context, or this third pole. And that third pole, your couple bubble, is that safe, secure base that you both have to find your way back to. So this becomes really evident, because here's the thing, any sense of disharmony here is only attracted here to inspire more healing. It is like the pearl, it's like the irritant in the oyster. It's the thing that creates the pearl. But a lot of us, when we taste conflict, we spit that out with no hope that it can ever be anything different. So no matter how often these reactions occur, each one of these, let's say, negative situations or events reveals the next feeling in line that we need to transform by the power of love and acceptance. Because reminding ourselves that you have the power and the freedom in the relationship to choose something better, to choose something different, to choose to take charge of your love. And that means both parties need some love and some help. And I see this again, this dynamic all the time, and it doesn't need to go down this way. It's, at any point, the most mature person, the resource person, has the responsibility and choice to own up to what's going on within themselves. And hopefully that's a shared experience, a shared energy. But to remind ourselves that the power of one, it only takes one person to change the rhythm of this dance, this co-regulation, this vicious cycle. But here's what we need. And I shared this a little bit ago, things that we need, going back to, we need to have shared vision, a shared map, and shared tools. We need awareness, presence, to get above the line of the drama triangle into more of this, above the line into the empowerment triangle, where we're not playing the rescuer, victim, or the rescuer, persecutor, victim, these two one-up, one-down positions, three one-up, down positions, but more into becoming more of the, instead of the rescuer in that moment, becoming more of the champion, the coach, the people's champion, instead of being a perpetrator, being more of the, someone that can be challenging, again, championing the relationship. And if you're kind of find yourself more in that one down victim state, becoming more the creator, the co-creator of this process, and to leapfrog up that mountain. But we need that. So, and because here's the desire to work through this stuff on each of our sides. And when I talk about relationship, there's, it's like a pie, right? We want to make the pie bigger, but I'm committed to take 100% responsibility of my 50% of the relationship. And my hope is my partner will also take 100% responsibility for their 50%. But usually you see it where one person's taking 100% responsibility for 100% of the relationship, and that doesn't work. Or one person's making the other person 100% responsible for 100% of the relationship. And, our business here, when we get triggered, is to kind of find, even if you think they're 97% at fault, what's 100% of your 3% in that snapshot moment? Sure, we have preferences that, your partner go work on their triggers and hurts and come up, in the relationship with you. But we don't need that, because I'm committed to my own development and to working through my part. And I'm committed to having my partner feel understood and received by me. Why? Because they matter. They matter to me because I want to know all of you. I want to know you and all of you. I want to know, because that deep ocean, this getting her world and getting his world, is a mystery, and it takes that time and experience. And as I always say, communication is a dynamic process of discovery. And that's a discovery. Deep waters, high tides, low tides, rip tides. That's a mystery. So let me break down here the DNA of a conflict. And then we're going to get into the DNA and the structure and the outline and kind of this blueprint of what these conflicts look like, so that we can begin to look at it from 30,000 feet and understand that this is a typical normal conflict. And when we can identify the steps and the strategies and the signature moves and all the stuff that goes on, we can begin to break through these upper limit barriers to love and connection and belonging and do it. So here's what it looks like. And see if this sounds remotely familiar to you. All right, so what happens is when couples disagree, most repeat this kind of following disruptive pattern where there's blame, criticize, defend, express contempt, distance, emotionally or physically withdraw, shut down. And John Gottman calls this the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, which is that you have one person who comes in with a complaint, and the other person's interpreting that complaint as a criticism, and the other person then goes to withdrawal or defensiveness and does that, deny, attack, reverse blame, go to the victim, and goes back to this whole offender type thing, and you're not getting anywhere there. So now we become very distressed in this gridlock but here's the thing, distress is not necessarily about how many fights you have, or even if you resolve the fights. Distress is about how you fight and whether you can retain some sort of emotional connection after the fight. And while traditional types of, let's say, marital counseling tend to be more open-ended and seek to solve immediate problems, such as continual arguing by focusing primarily on the behavior change and communication skills, which are soft core skills, which are fine. But here with the Reboot Your Relationship approach, we're going to hone in on expressing a couple's appreciation for how each partner feels in order to build trust and a secure base they can each rely on, right? So this is the approach. And because in that approach, couples can learn to recognize the negative cycle, because the cycle is the enemy, not your partner. They're not the bad guy. You're both coming in running your pattern here, whether you're an island or a wave, or you're avoidant or a pursuer, or whatever that pattern is, you're running this pattern. And it's hard to see the picture when we're in the frame. So when I get with you guys,
where one person is criticizing and the other person is responding defensively or withdrawing. And here's what we want to learn. I want the couples, I want you to begin to learn to identify the needs and fears that keep you in that vicious cycle, around and round. So what we learn here is I want to help you identify and express these underlying emotions, these deeper waters. And we're partners as you can begin to learn to empathize with each other and become more supportive of each other. That's where the partners come together and you're able to create and meet each other, the emotional needs you're both expressing, and can begin to comfort each other in those needs. Now, I always like going back to Latin. The word comfort in Latin means to be with. Fortes means to strengthen. So you're coming alongside in comfort, to come alongside, okay, be with, okay, in that space between, to strengthen the relationship. That's the comfort. That's where we want to go. That's how we show up. That's the care that we've been talking about in the other podcasts, the caring behaviors. Because until you are a couple that can identify and acknowledge and ultimately forgive these mutual injuries, this emotional gulf persists within and between the two of you, that space between, and you're never able to really get back to the good, right? So no matter how dissatisfying things have become within and between you, and how unhappy or angry, we get as partners, how unhappy we may be, each of you need to feel safe to come together to work out your problems, to work through the patterns, and to find source solutions. So each partner, okay, we're going to help you help you meet the needs and understand the needs and the emotions that are dictating and driving these actions, right? And these emotions behind these perceived problems are the key to understanding each other. And so that's important. That's what we're going to be getting into as we keep going on today. So when a couple comes to my office for a reboot, either an intensive or a seminar or one-on-one, what we bring into this dynamic in the relationship is the pain that's in them. And you see this pain cycle or fear cycle or shame, because neither partner sees the issue in the same way, and they don't know how to solve it. For instance, you could have something as simple as this from a masculine and feminine perspective, right? So let's say both of you say exactly the same words. I have no clothes to wear, right? So if you're a guy, I know the women are thinking one thing, the guy's thinking nothing, the other thing. The guy's probably thinking, I have nothing clean to wear, right? And if you're a woman, I'm not saying this is true for everybody, I'm just saying you may go right away to, I have nothing new to wear. Just that sentence alone can create a confusion and a conflict, because we're looking at it through a different lens altogether, because you're not seeing it the same way. And so you argue about it repeatedly, and talking about it just starts the argument again, because talking is the most dangerous thing you can do. It is the most dangerous. So we're going to start with, how do we create these safe conversations so that we're able to maintain and slay that dragon and pull you guys off the cliff. So, but here's the thing too, the rate at which these disagreements escalate is a lot of times an indicator of how many times you argue the same issue. I have couples that have been coming to me in 20 years of marriage and are still fighting about the same thing. And it's the same imprint, it's the same attachment injury, it's the same thing. And you know what I'm talking about. You're bringing up the past, and you never close that loop, and your nervous system keeps circling around that same injury over and over again, and you think that faster is faster. Well, faster is not faster. Faster is slower. So we're going to talk about in this segment about how do we slow that down. So you do the play-by-play, just like we got the Super Bowl coming up, and you do the play-by-play. The play-by-play is basically slowing it down so we can identify each moving part, because we're not dealing with anything new, because your brain is dealing with this novelty, which is like, it's much more slowly than something we necessarily, like, say, habituated. So we help the couple slow down so you can have this corrective emotional experience with something new and to be able to see each other in a very different way. So my approach in trauma-informed relationship psychotherapy for couples, we use this idea of proximity, looking at micro-expressions, body language to help us achieve more constructive outcomes that have a lasting effect outside your time. And this is really super important because when we get into these patches where there's challenges, we really got to be able to slow down and attune to each other. So let me explain attunement. Kind of think about like your radio. Your radio, the old radios, right, where you had to do the dial-in, you had to kind of find the station and frequency, and you're tuning, and to get the right station you got to attune, right? So, because this is, when you're dealing with some of these attachment injuries or wounds or this conflict, we have to slow things down, and because the reality is that trust is built slowly over time. And Dr. Gottman, John Gottman, talks about this a lot, as he said that the basis of trust is really the idea of attunement. So I want you to think of this idea of attunement as, one is, attuning is the awareness, right? And the awareness of and being present to your emotions, being connected to you, but also being aware of your other partner's emotions, right? Or the feelings or needs. Really being able to turn toward that. Turning toward your partner rather than away or against. Because in those sliding door moments that build trust, right, you're either turning toward your partner, which brings peace and harmony, or you're turning away or you're turning against. And we're going to get into that more in other segments about how that dance of turning toward, turning away, turning against either is, these small micro movements that build the trust in your relationship, or it can destroy it. And then we want to look at the tolerance. What's the tolerance? How do we create a sense of tolerance for the different viewpoints and perspectives? Because in every relationship is going to have a set of problems. You're going to have lifestyle problems, differences, personality differences, value differences, social, economic, all these types of things that go on, as well as like religious, gender, all these differences that until we are able to understand what get this understanding, we're going to kind of stay in that stuff. So, and then we got to get into this non-defensive responding, where we're, instead of blaming or denying and attacking, and disavowing personal responsibility and turning back and turning tables and making your partner the problem for pointing out the problem, which is just more pain, right? And being able to get into empathy, because the work of trust building occurs as you move through life together, which takes time. And I've seen this so often in relationships where you have one bad day, and there's no resolution, repair, or maybe one person's good at the resolution, saying, I'm sorry, but there's no repair, and the other person's really good at repairing. On the other side, and not really so good at the I'm sorry's, and they get into that roddy, and they're just in this conflict, right? So that part of this is not to say that the trust you have now isn't real, because it is real. But something's happening here, and we have to acknowledge and have that acknowledgement that the trust you do have is not yet as strong as it one day will be. It's a bad day. It's a bad day. We don't have to milk it for all day. But there simply is no substitute for mastering the tenets of attunement, and that's going to be something that we want to begin to discuss in other podcasts as well about trust building. What does that look like? It's so fragile. So fragile. Trust me, I know. I've been in those relationships where you have a bad day and you say the wrong thing, and you get triggered, and now you're the monster, and something happens, and the relationship gets hijacked and there is no repair. So trust is really important. So I talked about some of these things that we need to really connect to. And when I was looking at developing trauma-informed relationship psychotherapy method, we look at proximity, right? That closeness, that connection. Because when you're out of proximity with someone, it can bring up a lot of stress. Because oftentimes, you may feel like when you come to a session, you want me to kind of play the referee or give solutions. But with us, what I do with trauma-informed relationship psychotherapy, and we just call it Try RPM, the direction that we want you to do is to think about is that you're in each other's care. You're, that $96 million question that I keep presenting to everyone in every podcast about the care. Excuse me, I've been sick. You haven't told, can't tell. But in each other's care is, the $96 million question, right? If you really think about yourself and your attachment, emotional needs, the question is, are you there for me? Can I count on you? Do you have my back? Do I matter? Am I important? Are you accessible? Are you responsive? Are you emotionally engaging in my time of need, right? And I see this often where there's been a betrayal. The deepest betrayals is when you've had a time of need and your partner would not be there for you or show up. And I remember I was with a relationship one time, and I have high blood pressure, and I was having my own medical crisis. I was having a heart attack, and kept making calls, and they never came, right? And they never called back. And I was like, maybe they're stuck in traffic, or maybe they're having something's up. But that can create a sense of traumas, because being able to face each other and come together in proximity and to be there for another person in real time is such an important thing for you to do. And because then you're able to see, be able to come together, and when you have these micro expressions, and you start to see, you have these, you're able to fall back and love in each other's eyes. But what happens when you feel dangerous, because we're really good and really sophisticated at reading each other and mirroring each other. It's kind of think about it like this. Like if you grew up in a forest, and I grew up in a forest, and say in your forest, you're walking through the forest, you see a brown squiggy thing, you go pick it up, and it's a stick, right? Now, if I'm walking through the forest, I see a brown squiggly thing, and go pick it up, and it's a snake, right? Now I'm coding and decoding all brown squiggly things as snakes, danger, danger, danger. Okay, so now let's say you grew up with a father or mother, it was like walking on eggshells, and you see that brow and that look, and not walking around like a tiger, bristling, and you see that same thing in your partner, right? So now you see brown squiggly thing on the face, and we're coding and decoding brown squiggly things as snakes, danger, danger, danger. Now we're triggered because we're constantly seeing that, and those micro expressions. Like I have these thick, this brow, and so I used to have this look on my face when I would come home. I'd be stressed sometimes from work, and I'm just thinking like everybody. I walk in, and my kids scatter to the rooms. I'm like, what's wrong with them? Where'd they go? And because I had that look on this micro expression on my face, and I had to learn to soften that and walk in the house, not so scary, and make the bid for connection, and give them hugs and keep my smile on, so that I created an environment where, what they saw on my face wasn't this danger, 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 right? Something scary. So this is, when you look in someone's face, they may look a certain way. They may remind you, stop and think, and what does that remind you of, right? Maybe it reminds you of your mom making you feel guilty or disapproval, or maybe it's something else. I remember I was at work one day, long time ago, when I first started going through my doctoral program. I was working for a company as an executive director, and I was starting to understand these these affect contagions, emotional contagions, where we can kind of take on the other person's emotion and feelings and kind of misinterpret, project, and have this story, this movie. Something's wrong, looking for evidence of something's wrong, adding, subtracting meaning. It's exhausting. So the president of the company walks in, and she's got that look like my father, and I'm thinking to myself, I kind of shrink back, I go, ooh. And I don't have like a guilty conscience or anything, because I was rocking it, but something in me goes, danger, danger, danger. I'm looking at, this, my president of this company, she's got this angry look, and I'm now, what am I doing? I'm not doing the reality testing or perspective checking, going up and saying, hey, is everything okay? No, I'm avoiding her like a scared little kid, because I'm scanning her nervous system that's hijacked, and I think she's going to fire me, and so I'm avoiding her all day, and I'm just getting more and more angry and more amped and more triggered. I'm thinking, and I'm running this story in my head and ruminating about, oh, maybe I did something wrong, right? I'm taking on all this energy instead of going to her, which I did later at the end of the day after this self-punishment all day. I finally got the nerve and the strength and the courage to go do the reality testing with her, and said, "Hey, Tammy, what's going on? What did I do wrong? I'm taking like the little kid in the corner. I did something wrong, and trying to protect myself, feeling scared." And she goes, "Joe, I'm not mad at you. Why did you think I was mad at you?" Okay, so, and I go, "Because you came in with this angry look on your face." She goes, "Well, I got a ticket on the way to work." Imagine what it would be like if we could do more leading in, doing the reality checking, perspective checking, and being curious rather than judging, curious rather than projecting, curious rather than, catastrophizing or jumping to conclusions or making assumptions about something that's not even factually true. And that takes takes courage and vulnerability, yes, but all that energy that you're carrying with you, and then you go up and you get angry and you get these, the porcupine quills come out, and because there's a really simple thing that we work with, and that's doing reality checking and curiosity and wonderment and leaning in. And for a lot of us, we didn't have that growing up. We didn't have parents that were curious about us. Who was curious about you? Nobody. Who was wanting to know you, right? No, you're just in the corner as a kid, being ignored, alone, and you don't know how to go and ask for your needs to be met because you probably have been rejected, possibly, but you still don't know. But we're still kind of holding back, and all that micro expressions and everything starts to play out. So now we get to begin to understand how this can affect us, because the couples that function securely, let's say, can really calm each other down using eye contacts, proximity, tone of voice, body language, physical touch, because they act as this is like an emotional resource for each other. It's a soft landing. Instead of relying on themselves to calm down, which we still need to practice, but we have someone else outside the partnership to help soothe us so we can rely on them. And this is a interactive regulation, and it's generally very healing. It's part of our attachment system, and we know that we have that emotional support. But if we didn't receive such emotional support in our family of origin, that's a little harder for us to do. But that's something we are here to learn. And so what I do is I help couples assess the ability to accurately read and do the reality testing of each other's facial expressions rather than magnifying them and minimizing them, and to really get, understand what the body language is saying. So we do this by going granular, like in these micro expressions, because when we ask questions about what their partner's feeling, what you're doing there is, what do you see, and checking in with your partner to make sure you're getting it right. And this often, this exposes new data and information. So going back to my time when I was walking in the house, my kids were running away. My my oldest daughter, she stopped me and she goes, she does the reality testing and the perspective checking, and she says to me, "Daddy, are you mad at me?" And I saw my dad in the mirror just as she said that. I'm going, oh my gosh, she's brilliant. She's genius. She's checking in. She's reality testing. And instead of getting angry and defensive at her, at all, I kind of went back to my dad, and I actually had a very corrective emotional experience in that moment because she did something that I never felt I could do. And I was able to let her know, no, I'm just thinking about work and money and finances and all this stuff, going to school and working full-time, going to school full-time, raising a family. And she was able to kind of now have, instead of ghosting or gaslighting or making her wrong, I was able to give her some information, some data, right? Because what happens is we don't read each other's faces accurately. We're looking at all these micro expressions, and we can mistakenly apply these historical data from our childhood. And now I kind of had a corrective emotional experience about my dad. I thought, maybe when I was a kid, all those times that he was walking around like a bear with his angry face, maybe he was just thinking about work. Maybe he was just thinking about stress or paying the bills or, something happened at work. But I, as a little kid, we're kind of internalizing and personalizing it and making it all about us because, as kids, we're a little self-centered and it's all about us and it's all about it. So we haven't really climbed out of that, understanding that, and so we're able to look at these relationships in our current relationship in another way. But we need to be able to do this, and so sometimes we never learn that you can tell when someone's telling the truth by facial expressions or tone, body language, and timing, because instinctually, though, I'm trained to reflect whatever we see back in our clients, so that they can have a corrective emotional experience. Because sometimes, if you grew up with a parent that had this scowl on it, you may be interpreting that, but by reflecting back at what I'm clearly seeing, and in the argument, because a lot of times someone will say, "I don't feel like you're sincere," and I'm looking at this person going, "They are so sincere," but they're not seeing it the way I am, because it's hard to see the picture when you're framed, because there's so much familiarity about that. But by getting you guys face to face, eye to eye, going slowly and checking, getting to do and address the reality that's in front of you, and be able to present and focus and attune, right, in that moment, we're able to move past some of that stuff. And because the truth lies in the facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, timing, all that kind of stuff comes up for all of us. And this is not, so I'm going to leave you with a story with, and this is about perception, right? And the miracle in your relationship is going to be the shift in your perception and how you're seeing. So you're seeing the innocence and not the guilt. Okay, you're seeing something different. And I shared this story in another podcast, but I think it's relevant here because I love it. And Stephen Covey wrote about this in The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's one of his stories about perception, about this one man who, he was on a train. Steve Covey was on a train. And this man got on after it was late at night, and it was a midnight train across the country. It's late, everyone's tired, lights are out. This man with 3 children, 3 boys, gets on and sits right behind Mr. Covey. And the father just looks out the window and he's just checked out. And he's just looking like this irresponsible father. And the 3 little boys are running around like crazy and yelling, screaming, kicking things. And now you're observing this. You're observing all this activity. And I want to remind you, in any conflict, there's multiple dimensions co-occurring simultaneously. Not one of these dimensions can define the conflict, right? To make sense of it, to connect with that. So here they go, and so they're observing and watching. And so if you're a passenger on that train, what's your judgment? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? Okay, some of you may be feeling anger. Some of you may be feeling, you're sensing judgment, or thinking, what's wrong with this guy? And we're just projecting all these stories and theories and motivations and beliefs about what this man's doing, what these children are doing. He's irresponsible. I can't believe it. I'm trying to sleep. I'm tired, frustrated, angry, confused, pissed. Whatever that is, now we have all this stuff happening. So they're looking at Steve because he's the closest, and they make him the chairman to say something to the father. And Steve goes, hey, dude, do something with your kids. And the father comes out of his trance, and he goes, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We just came from the hospital, and my wife died, and I don't know what to do, and my kids don't know what to do. And it's just, I'm sorry, And so, wait for it. Okay, be with what just happened internally for you. You had a corrective emotional experience because why? Okay, now here's the thing. Nothing changed. Everything's the same. The kids are still doing that. Dad's still grieving, and the kids don't know what to do or how to grieve. But something shifted, right? In your perception, in the micro expression, in the proximity, all this stuff. So all this is going on. And now you have more information, more data. You have more understanding, compassion. Now, you go from anger, rage, judgment, right? You all were doing it. I do it too. Because that's who we are. And in a snapshot moment, okay, the miracle in the perception, because now we have a different perception. We're able to do the reality testing and perspective checking to see what's actually happening here rather than running our story and our own pattern of what just happened. And we go, oh my goodness. So do I need to, so remember I told you I don't teach necessarily behavior modification skills or communication skills. You know why I don't do that? I mean, we do it sometimes, but because that's first order change. That's just changing behavior. Second order change is a shift in our perception. That's the miracle. Because now you went from anger and rage, judgment, to compassion, empathy. And I don't have to teach or train any one of you what to go do next. Wait for it. What do you do next? If you have compassion, empathy, you're going to go take care of those kids and comfort them, and because now you're softening that instead of your porcupine quills coming out in anger, the mob mentality. We're going to judge this guy and hang him, and whatever. But this is the thing that in couple therapy, when we are not seeing through this lens, in attuning, we can make all sorts of assumptions. Go to black and white, all or nothing thinking, disqualify the positive, stop being curious, not be, wondering what's going on. And it gets us in these unsafe conversations. Things become dangerous, these vicious cycles, because now you have a story, you got this, something happened in the story, adding, subtracting meaning, looking for evidence, this vicious cycle. Oh, guys, this is where we want to go, get beyond this same pattern over and over again, because there's something here. There's something here. We all have selective attention. Go Google the gorilla experiment on selective attention. Go Google it, watch it a couple times. There's several. And then come back and let me know what you've discovered. Come back and write me some notes and see what you discovered. And to see, because we're only looking at it through one lens. And we're only looking at the person as the problem. And the solution to the problem is to get rid of the problem, or to make the problem go away, or blame the problem, something. But I'm here to help you guys. We're here. I hope this was very helpful today. I look forward to, we're going to be doing some safe conversation classes and some other Reboot Your Relationship intensives, these podcasts, these webinars coming up. We're launching a lot of stuff. We're going to be on Talk, which is, if you go to Facebook, Talk, confidential. We're going to be building our tribe and community around really having these safe conversations around some of the deeper stuff, around relationship stuff and all sorts of stuff. But give me, if this resonates with you, give me a call, or you can click on the link that I posted here. to book a 30-minute consultation. And we have a lot of different other programs coming up here for you as well. But give me a call or text me or email me, and you can find that in the on my website. You can find that also on this podcast. My number is 310-560-0726, 310-560-0726. Or just go back there and you can click on schedule a 30-minute free consultation, and I'll be glad to walk you through all that stuff, and we can get back to good. All right? Very nice to see everybody, and make this your best day.